Tuesday. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you guys very much for tuning in today. This is going to be a two-parter. Part one here, we're going to look at the more traditional stick and ball sports as we take a look at all the news surrounding the Calgary Flames. Plus, the Calgary Stampeders make a big move today. And it's been a wild 24 hours in the National Basketball Association, so we will get into all of that. Part two is going to be about the world of professional wrestling. Monster news from Wrestling Today as WWE Raw is off to Netflix. What that means, and a whole lot more around that. Plus, as we get ready for the Royal Rumble this weekend, a look at the go-home show for Monday Night Raw. So that is part two. Part one here, focusing on the NHL, Canadian Football League, and the National Basketball Association, with a bit of today's ticket sprinkled in at the end. As always, you can find me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I am at Primetime Klein, twitch.tv/PrimetimePK, and you can email this show, couchpotatodiary@yahoo.com. If you are watching this on YouTube, thank you. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel. If you are listening in podcast form, still subscribe, but also leave a review. All that stuff greatly helps. All right, so that is all of that. Let's get into the show. First with these guys, Calgary Flames. So, a lot going on this Calgary Flames game day as the team gets ready to take on the St. Louis Blues tonight. First, there's reports coming out of Vancouver that the Calgary Flames, Nils Höglander is the apple of the Calgary Flames' eye, as both Rick Dhaliwal and Sat Shah reporting that the Flames have been very intrigued by what they have seen from Nils Höglander, and any trade that could involve a Tanev heading out west would have to include a Nils Höglander coming back here to Calgary. And this is something that I talked with Canuck Clayton Emo about. Check out his YouTube channel right now. He's fantastic. But we talked about this on the now defunct Game Over, and I am so intrigued by this player. I think that there is an incredible amount of offensive upside that hasn't quite been reached yet out in Vancouver, just because they kind of have a lot of really good dudes, especially this year. And so it is very similar to the Sharangovich situation, where he's kind of being pushed to the back of the line, but he has front of the line offensive upside. And I think that he's really, really talented, and another one of those guys who is just scratching the surface. And if the Flames aren't going to go the rebuild route, I was thinking about it, this is kind of Moneyball, but you're not trying to, like, oh, this is something the league isn't seeing in these guys. It's, this is a way that we can rebuild, but also tell our owner we're not. Like, it's trying to trick things a little bit here, but it is a really, really smart way of going about it, seeing where players maybe aren't necessarily thriving and try to get that out of them instead of just getting a bunch of draft capital. It leads to a lot of interesting discussions for sure about team management and team building, but overall, I would like this for the Calgary Flames. And I think if you are going to make these moves, it's the reason why when I talk about this, I talk about Höglander. I talk about whether it's Nyes, Robertson, or some of the other, Liljegren out in Toronto, or a couple of the kids who we saw at the World Juniors. I think that this is probably the route that Calgary will end up going. And that leads to, like I said, it's a bit of a different Moneyball approach to rebuilding, because it does take some of the guesswork out of it, right? Like, we knew that Sharangovich was at least capable of scoring 25 goals. You draft a kid in the first round, no idea, as we've seen from the draft. You know Nils Höglander has an offensive upside that can at least work somewhat at the National Hockey League level. Second round pick, no idea. So I am generally in favor of taking proven commodities over draft picks. The one issue with it is you still need difference makers. And as much as I love what Sharangovich has done this year, to call him like difference maker on a championship winning team. He's been a difference maker on the Flames this year, but that's the Flames. Höglander would be, I think, like a pretty dynamic offensive player. Is he a game changer when it comes to championship pedigree? No, he's not. And no knock on either of those players. There are but so many of those guys out there in the National Hockey League. And so that is why rebuilding becomes so appealing, is your opportunities of getting the best of the best increase when, quite frankly, you're bad for a couple of years, you get a couple of high draft picks, bing, bang, boom, now you got a core, and off you go. Now, it's not perfect. See, up in Edmonton and 1,000 other examples, Ottawa right now is going through it as well. This is an interesting way of going about it. You still, whether you need lottery luck or one of these kids to just absolutely blow you away with the potential that they have, you still need something to go your way. But I do overall like this approach by the Flames. I kind of like it a little bit more than here's 9 draft picks, a bunch of dudes at the NHL level who aren't NHLers, and just go about it that way. If you play the kids and your team sucks and then you get the draft capital out of it anyway, then fine. But I think it's a couple of real... I think it's a really, really intriguing way of going about things from a Flame standpoint, and one that we haven't really seen around here before. So bravo on the Flames if this is the way that they go. And there's still a lot of time between now and the trade deadline in a couple of months to see how that all plays out. They are playing the St. Louis Blues tonight. The Blues have points in 3 of their last 5, playing a murderer's row of teams. They just finished a back-to-back with Washington. Before that, they had Philly, Boston, and the Rangers. So they are right in the same area as the Flames, where they are not doing great against good teams, although, again, points in 3 of 5 against those quality teams out east. But like the better teams in the league will beat them up. They will beat up on the also-rans of the league. And now they're in a position where the teams around them they have to beat if they're going to get into a playoff spot. Right now, the Blues are, I believe it's 5 points out of a playoff spot, and they do have 3 games in hand on the Nashville Predators, who hold that last wild card spot in the West. And so this is another one tonight for the Flames, where if you are this team, if you are a playoff team, this is a game you win. They didn't when they played back in October. The Blues absolutely shut them down. This is not an overly exciting St. Louis Blues hockey team by any stretch of the imagination, but it's very similar to the spot that they're in with the Flames, where they aren't necessarily sold on tearing it down, but if they did, they have a few pieces that could really shake things up. Like if both these teams, and it sounds like the Flames are, and it doesn't sound like the Blues are there yet, but if both these teams just went, screw it, we're ripping this thing down to the studs. Buchnevich being available is real interesting. Parayko, Calgary has been tied to him apparently. Parayko would be real interesting. The Blues could really dictate how this trade deadline goes, and that would make things really, really interesting leading up to March the 8th. So a lot to really digest from these two teams, but this is an interesting matchup for the Flames tonight. And from a Calgary standpoint, back-to-back losses against excellent teams, but before that, again, beating teams that are in this area. Good win against Vegas, and then a couple of wins against Arizona. This is a game they should win tonight if they are this playoff contender that they want to be. Interesting lineup note tonight as Dylan Dubé remains away from the team for non-medical reasons, and again, you just hope that he is all right. I know that's a player that I've been critical of. But like from a real life standpoint, you don't want him to be affected by this stuff or anything like that. So you hope that everything is all right with him. Cole Schwindt checks into the lineup tonight as he'll be the man down the middle with it was Greer and Klapka on that fourth line. I'm quite fascinated to see how Klapka continues to adjust here at the NHL level. Schwindt hasn't really blown you away at the NHL, but filling in on a fourth line role, you're totally fine with that. So I think there's a lot of intriguing pieces on this Flames team right now to try to check out and see how things go as the season goes along. So there's a bit of a Flames talk off the top. Looking to do this more, obviously, as one of the outlets anyway that I had to talk about the Calgary Flames went away over the last little bit. So that is that. Some big news here in Calgary on the football front. Let's talk about the CFL. It is the end of the era, or the end of an era, for the Calgary Stampeders, the end of the John Hufnagel era, as the Calgary Stampeders announced today that Hufnagel has moved into an advisory role, and Jay McNeil has been named the new team president. Ryan Ballantyne had Jay McNeil on his podcast, said that he was enthusiastic. That is now all that I know about Jay McNeil. I have emptied the notebook on Jay McNeil and my experience with him. I don't know a lot about him, can't speak to it, so not going to. On the Hufnagel side of things, I say the end of the era, and I don't say that lightly. This man was at the helm for, I think, one of the great runs that this organization has had. And it is too bad that it doesn't have the championship success that others did, or that maybe they should have, I guess. But I don't think you can look at this run and think of it as anything other than just a transformative time for this organization. You look at, like, under John Hufnagel, this team was the gold standard for how a team should be built. And I mean in any league where it is one guy goes down, one guy goes out with injury, and it's a next man up mentality. They always had someone to replace someone. They always found, whether it was internally, externally, they always found the right answer to stay competitive. And not just competitive, but like they were for the regular season, they were a dominant franchise for basically the entire time Hufnagel has been here. And before, it was like this team was good. He took them to great. And it was just that their worst game of the season happened to be in the championship game a couple of times. And that is, I think, going to limit the legacy of John Hufnagel here. But this is a time that I think Stampeders fans will look back on fondly. And I do think that here in Calgary, it's going to be a bit of maybe we should have appreciated that a little bit more than we did, because this team was consistently hosting West Finals, tops in the conference, going to Grey Cups. The success wasn't always there. It was there a bit, but it wasn't always there. But still, the way that this organization was run, where it was next man up on the offensive line, defensive line, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, all of it, they found new guys to come in and just keep that train running. And that has stopped now, at least for the time being. But I think that this should be a legacy that is looked back upon very fondly here in Calgary, as John Hufnagel was just an absolute beast when it came to putting this team together and getting the most out of these guys when he was the head coach. Okay, let's transition in the world of basketball. Some breaking news happened just before I hit record. Let's get into it. The Milwaukee Bucks making a big move today as they have fired head coach Adrian Griffin not even 50 games into his NBA coaching career. This was Griffin's first time as an NBA head coach, and now he's not anymore, as the Bucks have decided to go a different way. And I think this presents more questions than answers. If this was just about getting Doc Rivers in there, then you should have done that in the first place. If you weren't going to let Adrian Griffin figure out the season with an entirely new group in Milwaukee, right? Like Dame Lillard figuring things out in Milwaukee, Giannis figuring out how to play with him. How is the defense going to work? Is the defense going to work? How is all of this going to play out? To have all of those questions surrounding this team and then not let the coach have a full season to try to figure it out, what's the point in doing it in the first place? So there's a lot of talk today about how there must be something else to this. And that's the only thing I can think of, because this is panicky shit for an organization to just let go of a coach who has his team second place in the East. Do they look as good as Boston right now? No. Do they look as dominant as maybe some people thought they might? No. But A, I think they're getting there. B, there was always going to be a stretch here where they had to figure all of that out. And you wanted to see, what could this offense be aside from just Dame and Giannis pick and roll 1,000 times, because that would be unstoppable. And defensively, you wanted to see, could this team guard at all, because Dame Lillard can't really. And Giannis as a perimeter defender isn't the lockdown guy that a lot of people imagine he could be, but him and Brook Lopez down at the block, very good rim protection down low. But it has been up and down, but it's been significantly more up than down in Milwaukee. And so, like, Doc Rivers is 100% a better coach than Adrian Griffin. I will not argue that for a second. But if you weren't going to let Adrian Griffin have at least a season to make sure he knows how to fit all these pieces together, then what was the point of hiring him in the first place? I do not get this move for Milwaukee. And maybe Doc Rivers comes in and he is the answer. He has not been a perfect coach, but he is a fine head coach at the National Basketball Association. So I want to say that this is that there must be something more to this, but it looks very panicky for the Milwaukee Bucks last night. And one of the reasons they may be panicking is the Philadelphia 76ers are coming. Joel Embiid last night, 70 points against the San Antonio Spurs. Just an absolutely beast of a performance from Joel Embiid. 21 points coming from the free throw line. He was a monster all game. And it is wild now that Joel Embiid is probably having a better season this year than he was during his MVP year a season ago. Like, this is a 3-year stretch of just absolute pure dominance from a gigantic man who has been the face of this franchise for a while now. And we're seeing a run of him healthy, and we're seeing what he really can be and what the 76ers organization can be. And that puts the pressure on the Philadelphia 76ers. Joel Embiid has played as many games in the Eastern Conference Final as I have. That is absolutely absurd. The pressure has to be on. With how well he is playing, it can't just be, well, we had a tough opponent in the second round and didn't get there. They had a 3-2 lead on the Celtics and a chance to put that game away, and they didn't. And then Game 7 was just atrocious for them all game. But for Philadelphia now, that the pressure has to be on. They got rid of James Harden, so that the headache is out of the room now. They got some real flippable pieces back in that move. Now is the time to go out and get another guy to go along with Joel Embiid, because this is a performance that cannot be wasted again by the Philadelphia 76ers. And maybe that guy's Kyle Lowry, as he gets traded from the Miami Heat to the Charlotte Hornets in a deal that also includes a 2027 first-round pick. I would imagine Lowry is renting, not buying in Charlotte. I'll put it that way. I don't think Lowry is very long for the Hornets. Now, they're going to try to trade him because with the new salary cap restrictions in the NBA, he is very limited in terms of teams that he can sign with if he does get bought out. So they're going to try to flip him to a team. And I think Philadelphia makes a lot of sense. He doesn't, like, it's not, okay, there, now you're a championship team. But it's what we talked about in the hockey discussion yesterday. Raises that floor a little bit for the Philadelphia 76ers, provides a bit of that championship pedigree that they may need. And I think would be a real interesting piece, reunited with Nick Nurse. For Charlotte, they're just tearing down. It hasn't worked in Charlotte around ball. We'll see what does end up happening there, but it's starting over in Charlotte for sure. For the Miami Heat, this is a fantastic fit. Like Terry Rozier, the second you see that he's going to be on the Miami Heat, it's like, yeah, that's a Heat player. And so again, this certainly makes them better. I still don't think it makes them better than Philly or Milwaukee or Boston. Now, we have seen before, they don't necessarily need to have more talent than any of those teams to beat them in a playoff series. They can do that on their own just fine. But they need to, I don't want to say they need to get more, but if they want to really be on par with those guys, this can't be the last move. They've taken a couple of big swings lately and come up on the short end of a Damian Lillard trade or something along those lines. I think if they're going to be a championship team, I think this needs to be, it's a big piece of it, but I don't know if it can be the only piece, because it still feels like they're hanging around in the Cleveland Knicks, Pacers area, just below the tier of Boston, Milwaukee, and Philadelphia. But the East is going to be so much fun this year in the NBA. The West is too. Like, the NBA is just at a fantastic time in terms of talent. And if they are bringing in a Vegas and a Seattle, then those teams are coming in at the absolute right time, because there's so much talent in this league right now. All right, let's close the show out today with a little bit of gambling. Here is what is on today's ticket. 4 games for you today, 3 of them in the NHL. We got the Dallas Stars minus 139 against Detroit. Dallas is a team that I have a lot of respect for. I like Detroit a lot, but these two teams are not on similar planes. And so to be able to get Dallas at a relatively good number, minus 139, to just win a hockey game, we'll take that one. Sticking in the NHL, I still don't think Montreal is that much worse than the Ottawa Senators are. I think the Habs can pick up a win here against the Sens on I think it's nationally televised game up here in Canada. So Habs, Sens, I'm going Montreal plus 123 over Ottawa. And in the NHL as well, the New York Rangers minus a goal and a half against the San Jose Sharks. That one is just you see minus 1.5, because now Chicago's minus 2.5 in a lot of these games, and that might be a bit much. But the Rangers minus a goal and a half against San Jose, I will still absolutely take that one. And one from the association, the Knicks minus 3.5 against Brooklyn. The Knickerbockers playing some really good basketball right now. Brooklyn is as well, but they're just not on the level of the Knicks. So 4 games for you on today's ticket. And that's today's show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Part 2 of this will be coming up in a matter of moments, looking at a gigantic day in the world of professional wrestling as the WWE is cutting the cord with Monday Night Raw as they move to Netflix. So we will get into that, plus the Raw Go Home show heading into the Royal Rumble. We will break all of that down coming up in part 2 of this podcast today. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. If there's something that you really agree with or really don't agree with, leave a comment. That would be greatly appreciated. And if you're listening in podcast form, please subscribe to the channel and leave a review as well. Find me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I'm at Primetime Klein, twitch.tv/primetimepk, and you can email the show, couchpotatodiary@yahoo.com. Talk to you guys in a sec. I'm out.